had a podcast, would you go on it?
Sure.
You would? Great. Okay, let me know what you're talking about.
If Vladimir Putin had a podcast, I'd go on it. If Joe Biden had a podcast, I'd go on it. If a feminist has a podcast, I'd go on it. If Piers Morgan has a podcast, I'll go on it. If Alex Jones, I don't see the point you're making. Says.
No, I'm asking you what you think.
I think that if a woman marries a man and she decides to take his last name, that they have different roles and responsibilities within that marriage, and I believe that.
That's not the question.
I believe the father. I am. The father hands her.
Don't behave like a politician.
The father hands her to the man.
Right, but don't be a politician, because I think you're a straight talker,
sure.
Right? You keep telling me you're a straight talker. Sure. I think my sister is her husband's property. Do you regret saying it like that?
I understand that with my newfound fame, perhaps it could be phrased differently. However, I still believe that a woman is given to the man in marriage. That's what I believe.
Yeah, but not as property.
No, the property is the word that other people use when they ask me the question.
But as an equal partner in a loving union. That's what marriage actually means. It doesn't mean that when you get married, the woman is given to you as a bit of chattel. You question now and you say something and then say, well, actually, I blame you for asking.
I understand, Piers. Piers, I understand. I believe the woman is given to the man. I believe she's given away by the father. I believe she belongs to the man.
So fundamentally, you do believe that a woman becomes a man's property at marriage.
I believe she belongs to the man in marriage, correct.
Right. I mean, see, that to me is misogyny.
And you're entitled to your opinion.
Right. But do you not understand why people think it is misogyny?
I understand why some people can be very offended by what I say. What they do is they take a point like that and they ignore all the other points I make the other way around.
Yeah,
do you believe your wife was given away to you when she took your last name?
I believe that there is a process where a father traditionally walks his daughter down the aisle and hands his daughter to this man, and they stand there and become a union of two loving people in a partnership. No, there's no ownership involved.
I didn't say
ownership. He's not selling her. The father of the bride isn't selling his daughter.
No, absolutely.
That's what property means.
She becomes a member of your family.
Is it?
I think we're arguing over semantics.
We're not, though, because fundamentally, I don't believe a man owns a woman. You do.
Well, I don't think a man owns any sovereign individual. I don't think we live in the world of slavery. I don't own any men or any woman.
Right.
Nobody owns
but
anybody.
When you use phrase logic.
Completely. I understand all of this very well, which is why when you're saying I was backtracking, I'm not.
Do you have any regret, though, over the way you phrase this stuff?
Well, this is the point I was trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is when I was not nearly as famous and I was making long format content, I was not sitting there anticipating I'd become the most Googled man on the planet and that a few seconds could be taken out of context. That was not my anticipation.
No, but it's still what you believed. It's what you believe now. So what's the difference?
It's not about, you're asking me, you're saying that young people who are impressionable.
If you said to me, look, Piers, honestly, I've had time to think about this and I wish I hadn't said it, I don't believe that. That's one thing. Actually, you've said the opposite. You said, actually, that's what I think, yeah.
I think that when
it doesn't really matter whether you recorded it when you're famous or not famous. It's what you actually believe, right?
I believe that a man has a duty to protect and provide for a woman. I believe that a woman's father gives her away to the man. That's what I believe, and that's in my marriage. That's the circumstance I'm going to live under. If people want to live in a different scenario, that's completely theirs. Their prerogative.
You went on to say about authority over women. If I have a responsibility over her, I must have a degree of authority.
Yeah.
For the same reason, if I have responsibility over and people are going to use their mind, it's an example, an analogy. Responsibility over a child, I have to have some authority.
Yeah.
So you believe as part of your ownership or your property of the woman, you have authority over her.
No, I believe if you have...
That's what you said.
I believe if you have responsibility over something, you have to have a degree of authority or you can't be responsible.
Yeah, but authority means, again, that you're the boss.
The point I'm making, if you'll please let me finish at this point, the point I was trying to make was talking about the safety of a woman. She was walking alone at night, and I was saying, well, I wouldn't let my woman walk alone at night. And they said, well, you're not in charge of her. You don't get to decide what she does. I said, I understand, but if I'm responsible for her safety, and I'm the person who's burdened with making sure she is safe, I have to have the authority to say, don't put yourself in unsafe situations. The two things are linked.
Well, you don't have authority. You can absolutely have the right to say to the woman you're with, I don't think you should, but ultimately...
If she decides, then I can't force her.
Right, so authority implies that you have the ability to control someone.
No, authority implies that I have the moral right to sit and say that that's an irresponsible thing to do and I'm responsible for
That's not what authority means.
Well, I'm not going to... If you think I'm going to lock somebody up in their room, is that what you're implying?
No, I don't think you know what authority means.
I know what it means. I'm saying that if
I just a different description of what authority means.
If I have responsibility for her safety, then I have to have the authority to tell her not to do unsafe things.
Yeah, but authority means that you have some form of control over this woman.
I think what you're trying to do...
I'm only trying to get to what you think. Honestly, I am. I come with no agenda here at all.
I understand. And I'm explaining very, very clearly. If I have responsibility over said subject, I have to have authority over it. So let me say you have children, right?
Right.
You have responsibility for them.
No, I have legal authority over my children. That is very different to having legal authority over my wife or my female partner.
Completely. But the point I'm trying to make...
So you accept that?
I accept that
because you used the analogy of responsibility for a child.
My friend, these are a person can give
voluntary authority is not authority.
No, but that's the point.
It's not.
Piers.
Andrew, it's not.
Piers, if a woman comes to me and says, "I want you to keep me safe," she is handing me authority for her safety.
But do you understand the difference between having authority over somebody and somebody giving you permission to have authority?
Completely. I never said
one is consensual and one isn't.
But why are we pretending I do unconsensual things?
Because you literally say, I must have a degree of authority. I have to have some authority. And the point about
only if I'm responsible for her safety. If I'm not responsible for her safety, I don't have authority.
If your position now is that with her permission, I would like to have authority when we go out at night to protect her, that's a different
That was
thing.
always my position.
But that's not what you said.
But that was always my position, Piers.
So, again, I don't agree with what you said before.
Because you're taking a soundbite from a 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, but you haven't been taken out of context, because I read you the entire sentence. It's very
But you've ignored all the context around the sentence, my friend.
You can't ignore a sentence that says, I must have a degree of authority.
But you can when there's a 2-hour conversation where a woman is telling me if she makes me responsible for her safety, and me explaining, well, if I'm responsible for your safety, I have the authority to make decisions.
Their teens. Are you comfortable that they would have that mindset? Be honest.
I think that young boys in their teens lack life experience, they lack nuance, and they need to be very, very careful what they're digesting online, whether it's my content or anybody else's.
Yeah, I think you know for a fact millions of them are digesting exactly what you're saying.
Completely. The entire internet, to a degree, I think any subject you can find, there's going to be a whole heap of content.
I come back to the Joe Rogan thing, Andrew. Is that a lot of what you say, I agree with.
Yeah.
Right? I do, genuinely. I've written a lot of stuff you said. A lot of the stuff you talk about, I think, yeah, he's got a good point, right? So we agree about a lot of things. But when I read that kind of thing, I'm like, how much of that is you? How much of that is some act? Do you regret saying stuff like this? I don't. And actually, do you see it as weakness to admit you shouldn't have said something like that?
No, I don't live with regret. I think what's happened is that, like I said, long format content, arguments with feminists, arguments with the toxic masculine crowd, arguments with the left, and they're going to take a small clip, small sentence from ours, and they're going to try and paint me as a villain.
But I'm not left or right.
I understand how it's been misconstrued. I understand how it's been weaponized against me. Do I regret it because it's been weaponized and used against me? Well, that's slightly annoying.
That's not why I want you to
Did I at the time mean what I said in the context of the conversation, which obviously you're not familiar with and the people at home are not familiar with? No, I meant what I said.
The 25-year-old women, they've just talked to more guys, been to the club more times, been effed and dumped more times, more arguments, more mess, more for me to clean up.
Well, there's a whole bunch of context and conversation around that's been missed, and I
don't think I'm missing much context.
Well, I encourage people who are interested to go watch it.
Right, but I mean, I've just read out 3 sentences on the bounce there. I don't think there's any context I'm missing. I mean, you've made it pretty clear what you think about the difference between 18 and 90-year-old women.
I wasn't talking about myself, even. I was talking with a Muslim guy who was on the panel, and he was explaining how youth is very valued in most parts of the world, and why virginity is valued in most parts of the world. The feminists were arguing against it, and I was sitting there, actually, very much like you, a mediator between the two, explaining why, in most of the world, still today, perhaps not in the Western world, virginity is coveted, youth is coveted in most of the world, and throughout all of human history. And I was sitting there making the point, explaining why, in certain parts of the world, they think how they do.
Well, last part was the one I asked you. So, as an interviewer, you're behaving...
Sure, okay,
Okay, you accept that. Let's accept we both got on. Okay. So, again, my point is simply, if a 26-year-old woman is watching this and has heard those comments, would you just say to her, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that?
No, I won't. I will say that I am sorry that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world...
That doesn't mean you're sorry.
No, I'm not sorry. That's the point I'm making. I'm sorry if that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world that believe that, and I was mediating for a conversation.
Parts of they have to wear full burqas.
Well, that's a conversation.
They're not allowed to drive cars.
That's nothing to do with me.
But is that the kind of world for a woman that you...
I was mediating a conversation.
No, I'm asking you what you think.
I don't live in a country where that happens.
You're using that as the excuse for why you're not sorry for saying it.
It's not an excuse.
Is that there are parts of the world where this is fine?
My friend.
So my question to you is, well, do you think it's fine?
I don't think it's fine. I live in a world where...
You don't think it's fine?
The reason
This isn't that hard, Andrew. You can simply say, Piers, you know what? With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I hadn't said it like that. And if a 26-year-old woman's watching, I'm sorry I said that, because that actually is blatantly misogynist. And even though that's a view held by other parts of the world, it's not a view I share. Now, I would respect you more if you said that than if you try and say, well, it's said in other parts of the world, so I'm not sorry.
I believe that men find youth attractive in general. I believe that in the context of the conversation...
25-year-old women aren't old.
I agree with you, they're not. Especially, I'm old. I'm a lot older than that. The point I was making was part of mediating a panel, a conversation between feminists and some Muslim guys.
I get it.
Okay,
I get it.
Good. So you understand why I said the sentence.
But as far as I know, you weren't espousing what a Muslim man might think. You were espousing what you think.
I was espousing what the people on the panel believed.
But you were saying what you think.
I feel like you're trying to pin me down.
If it's not what you believe, just say, I don't believe that.
What part wouldn't I believe?
Well, you tell me which part you don't believe. There's the sentence. Which part would you now say you don't believe?
I believe that 25-year-old women perhaps have had, because they've been alive longer, maybe have had more partners, but I don't believe that makes them a bad person.
Right. But you understand that the way you phrased it makes every 25-year-old woman
I understand.
feel bad.
Well, then on all these points you're making...
And you've admitted that.
On all these points you're making, on repeat, you're taking these sentences and on repeat you're you're weaponizing them against me.
I'm not weaponizing anything.
Okay, it's fine.
No. You're weaponizing the weaponizing, which doesn't exist.
No problem.
Believe in the concept of marriage.
Completely. That's what we were talking about the whole time.
What do you think?
We talked about a man giving a woman away. Okay. I believe in marriage more than anybody. In fact, I believe in marriage I believe in marriage in the traditional sense. I believe a man has a duty to stand up and be a real man. I believe that the problem with the world today that we are facing is that not enough men are sticking to the age-old ways of masculinity. I believe that me standing up and saying a man must protect a woman and provide for her, so he needs to make sure that she's safe. He needs a degree of authority to protect her.
I have no problem with...
But people do have a problem with it.
That's
the world we're in now.
Andrew, I'm over here.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with what you just said. Here's all that.
Everybody benefits from social media views, as do you.
Was it The Hustler? What is it called?
I had an online school.
Called?
Hustlers University.
Right. And their whole job was to promote your clips, make you rich and famous. So you've benefited from this system, the one you now profess to hate. You've benefited from it.
I never said I hated it.
You've clickbaited like the best of them.
I never said I hated it. I'm saying what happened. I don't hate it. I don't hate social media. I think it's a very powerful force. I don't hate the social media.
It's the influence that this kind of thing has on young men.
Agreed.
Right? And I speak to someone with 3 sons, right? Who are, by the way, they're intrigued by you. They're fascinated, right? You're a big thing in that world of TikTok and so on. So they all are aware of you and what you say. So they're all looking. And when they see things like the machete thing, I get the context because I'm a 57-year-old guy who's been around the block a bit, and I can get what you've said, and you responding to a particular scenario which you'd created where a woman...
But it can be misunderstood.
I understand. So my point to you is, given that you know it can be misunderstood, do you regret saying things like this on camera where it can be disseminated by less intelligent young males who think that is actually what they should be doing to women?
And finally, we get to the point of the issue, which is the point I tried to make at the very beginning. When I made a video before I was famous that got 500 views, me being concerned that 1% of people will misunderstand it was not relevant. Where you start getting 5 million views a video, 50 million views a video, 1% of people misunderstanding
it. Doesn't change what
No, it doesn't. But it becomes a much larger problem.
I understand.
So with great fame comes great responsibility.
Right.
So
I agree.
Now that I'm famous, do I say things the same way as I did back before I was famous? Absolutely not.
Right.
Neither would you.
But there was also, I think, quite a disturbing piece that BuzzFeed did. And it talked about the negative impact of young, impressionable male minds when they've read or seen some of the more inflammatory things you've said. And they quoted, for example, Sandy, 22, from Washington. My father's gone from a man who minored in women's studies in college, who was kind and in touch with his emotions, treated all people, men and women around him, with kindness, to a man who says that whenever he sees an effeminate male stranger, he gets an overwhelming urge to murder them. He loves podcasts. He listens to a lot of podcasts. I know he's listened to Andrew Tate.
Whoa. Let's stop for a second. Let's be professional here, Piers, because you're a professional, as am I. First, she said, did you say that my father went? She said, my father has gone.
Her father.
That's a full-grown man, firstly. So we're talking about my impact on children. You just talked about a full-grown man here. Secondly, I've never talked about murdering effeminate men in anything online ever, in any context ever. So I don't know why they have taken some random person I've never met in the world who's full-grown, an adult, and come to their own conclusions who I've never met and lumped his name in with mine. That is absolutely unfair on every level.
Of transgender people.
That's nothing to do with me. I'm not transgender, and I don't understand the issue like they do.
Are you transphobic? Do you consider yourself that?
Transphobic? What? Afraid?
Well, it kind of, yeah. You have
I don't live in fear, my friend. I have no problem.
Do you have a dislike of transgender people?
I don't know any transgender people.
Do you have a dislike of what they stand for, what they are?
No. Why would I?
I don't know.
That's not my issue. That's not my issue. And that's actually quite interesting because when I was attacked, a lot of these stupid articles like BuzzFeed, because it's ridiculous, that first point proves anyone with a brain knows that that's garbage. when they attacked me, they lump a whole bunch of things in together. They say misogynistic, racist, transphobic. They just put them all together at random. No, I'm mixed race.
By the way,
I don't know where they get these. They just get these buzzwords and put them in a sentence.
By the way, I completely agree.
It's crazy.
And I've had the same thing done to me.
Okay.
And I'm not calling you anything. I'm asking you what you personally believe you are. Absolutely.
Okay, so you agree if you were walking down the street with a woman, you'd be responsible with her safety?
Yeah.
Cool, absolutely. So if that woman wanted to walk alone at
night... I don't think I have authority over the woman as we do that.
Okay, so let me ask you another question, Piers, because we are professionals. Let's say your woman decided she wanted to take a nice little walk through the south side of Chicago at 2 a.m., and she wanted you to go with her, and you were responsible for fighting and dying on the spot if she was attacked. Don't you think you would say to her, no, we're not going out right now, it's not safe?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd have authority to make the decision. So
no, I wouldn't.
So
I would say, I don't think you should. If she decides to, it's her own volition.
Well, if she decides, you're not going to stop her.
I have no power.
I'm not saying it's the case for everybody.
No.
I'm just saying.
Here's my question, though. Have you seen the guy's medical records?
Of course not. I just told you the story.
So you're just taking his word for it?
I am taking the word of a man who emailed me with a bunch of medication and specific doses.
You're denying proven science because one guy writes to you who you help and you've not seen any evidence he ever had clinical depression diagnosed.
I'm denying the idea that...
And on the back of it, you go on your rants in public to tens of millions of people denying something because this guy writes to you and says he had it and you cured him. And I think that's a dangerous mindset, Andrew.
That's fine.
And that's where you don't have a responsible view of your influence over people.
Disagree. It's very responsible because I'm saving people's lives. I disagree that if you feel depressed, I disagree that you cannot affect it and change your life and take control and fix yourself and feel happier. I disagree with that.
Do you think Alex Jones?
I think that Alex Jones is a sovereign individual who, very much like the rabid left, deserves a chance to speak on his points of view. I think that the truth on issues is usually somewhere in the middle between two extremes. And
you think Sandy Hook was staged?
I don't know anything about Sandy Hook.
Really? You know he's just been sued by the families for millions and millions.
I have no idea.
You don't know anything about it?
No.
So why would you support someone in public when you know nothing about the most infamous thing?
When have I supported him in public?
You have supported him in public.
I've been on his podcast.
Yeah, but you said nice things about him.
I say nice things about lots of people.
What do you think of Alex Jones?
I said nice things about you, Piers.
That's fine. so you should. I'm a nice person.
So to sit and say that I've been on a podcast and I say nice things about him,
you said you support
subject here, Piers. Stay on the subject.
You mentioned feminism.
Completely, but you're trying to get away from the point because what you did is you're trying to say because I did a podcast, I sanction all of this person's views, and I'm saying I do 5 podcasts a week. I do 5 podcasts a week, and I don't sanction 100% the views of any other person on the planet because I'm an individual and he has an individual views, as do you. So I don't know why you're trying to come at me with one of his views and pretend that's something to do with me.
Because it's a pretty big view.
No, but it's a lame trick, Piers, and you're better than this. So let's move on.
Would you?
It's lame, and let's move on.
Putin had a podcast, would you go on it?
Sure.
You would? Great. Okay, then we know what you're talking about.
If Vladimir Putin had a podcast, I'd go on it. If Joe Biden had a podcast, I'd go on it. If a feminist has a podcast, I'll go on it. If Piers Morgan has a podcast, I'll go on it. If Alex Jones, I don't see the point you're making.
The point of what I'm saying. I think deliberately.
No, what you're trying is a cheap trick. And I'm just making it clear to the audience.
It's not a cheap trick. I'm just curious where your moral line is.
It's a cheap trick.
Where's your moral line?
I disagree with the points of view with the majority of the people I do podcasts with. So it's a very cheap trick you're trying here. So
when people invent vile things to make themselves rich off the back of families of little kids who've been blown to pieces with a machine gun or a semi-automatic version of a machine gun, I think that is actually a line I wouldn't cross. I wouldn't be happy to go on someone's podcast when they've been responsible for doing that. It's not about political views or differences of opinion over facts. It's about somebody deliberately inventing a pack of lies to compound the grief of families. And I'm curious, you don't think you have any need to go down any kind of moral quandary about people like that before you continue to allow them to use you for their own promotion.
He didn't use me. He didn't use me for
Why does he have you on the podcast?
Because we disagreed and discussed points like we're doing with you right now.
Did you call him out on that?
Are you using me? We didn't discuss that.
I'm not using you. I'm giving you a platform most people aren't giving you right now to show the world who you really are.
Fantastic. So neither of us are using each other. I'm here on your show. I'm providing you with content. You're giving me a platform. And nobody's using each other. It's mutual. We don't agree on a whole bunch of issues.
That's fine. And interesting about the feminism thing.
Sure.
Do you identify as a feminist?
I think that women and men are fantastic. Both of us are fantastic. I think women reproduce. I think women need to be respected, protected, provided for. I think that modern feminism is kind of hard for me to even truly understand.
What do you think it means? What is feminism?
I think that the idea of feminism is that men and women are equal under the law.
And do you believe that?
Completely.
We should be treated completely equally.
Yeah, but we are equal under the law. Wouldn't you agree?
Not really. I think there are still some issues in the world where, certainly in workplace, the gender pay gap remains. they're not treated equally in most cases, women?
Well, that can be discussed, the gender pay gap. I think that's already been discussed at length. I think that there's actually...
You think women should go to work?
I think women should work completely.
You do?
Why wouldn't they?
Because in the parts of the country, of the world you were mentioning earlier, that have different views of women, they don't go to work.
In the parts of the world that person from the podcast was from, for the point I made, yeah, they didn't. But I don't live in those parts of the world. I think women should be free to work if they choose. I think it's very important that the family unit remains. I do believe that in my personal view, the most important and respectful thing a woman can do is become a mother. Inquest
this week found that a 14-year-old girl, Molly Russell, died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content. The coroner said she was exposed to material that may have influenced her in a negative way, and in addition, what started as depression and become a much more serious depressive illness, and she very sadly took her life.
That's absolutely disgusting.
Right. Her father...
It's terrible.
Her father's campaign for better protections against potentially dangerous social media algorithms, right? It says that the particularly graphic content she saw romanticised acts of self-harm, normalised her condition, and focused on a limited and irrational view without any counterbalance of normality. First of all, what is your response to that? Nothing to do with you.
That's the first thing. Yeah, it is nothing to do with me. The fact that a 14-year-old girl took her life is truly sad. The world we live in today is... The fact that something like that happened is almost mind-blowing to me. That's truly sad. I actually feel sad inside to see something like that. This fact that they just said it's romanticizing the gory element. I don't know what she was watching, some kind of suicide videos thing. I don't